Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Changing Minds, Changing Lives podcast. My name is Julie Sowash. I am one of the co founders and currently strategic advisor for the amazing team at Disability Solutions. Um, this season so far of the podcast has been really fun. If you haven't caught up on some of our past episodes, Dr. Vicky Verleza last month, excuse me, was so great. We had such a meaningful conversation, and she just gave me a lot of energy. I love good passion, and we need to hear that more often. So I would encourage you go check out some of our YouTube. Definitely check out Victoria; she was fantastic. Our conversation today is probably going to be a head scratcher for a minute. But not very long. I promise you, this is one of the most important conversations that I have with TA leaders, diversity leaders, operations leaders, when we are talking about building truly inclusive programs for people with disabilities or any successful business project we are supporting implementation of. And that's why my guest today is so important. So let me introduce Julie Gawle. She is a senior change analyst at Meaningful Change Consulting, LLC. She is a change and communications expert with more than 20 years of experience helping organizations navigate change. She's worked with Fortune 50 companies, organizations across healthcare, tech, telecom, and energy to improve engagement and adoption during major initiatives. So huge, huge projects. Julie helps leaders turn communication into action with a focus on what's really, really important. And I'm so excited to talk about manager enablement,
Mhm.
stakeholder engagement, and the human side of lasting change. So, Julie, welcome to Changing
Thanks,
Minds, Changing Lives.
Julie. It is so wonderful to be here today. Thank you. I'm really excited about our topic and I'm excited about where our conversation goes today. I agree with you. I think that this is one of the most important topics in business today. And so I'm looking forward to digging into it with you.
So, first of all, help our audience understand, what does change management mean? And give me an example of maybe a project that you've worked on that's unrelated to diversity or
Okay.
disability to help understand kind of the scale and importance of the work that you do.
Right, right. So, change management, by definition, is a structured way of helping people move from the way that they operate today into a way that they're going to need to operate in the future, very simply. So, a lot of times we hear about project management. Project management focuses primarily on delivering the solution. So, that might be the system, the process, the structure. It also includes timelines, deliverables. But change management focuses on whether or not people are going to understand the change, if they're going to know what's expected of them, if they're going to have the support that they need in order to be successful in the new way. And ultimately, they're able to work different. So, the goal here with change management is not necessarily like to deploy a solution, it's to help the organization achieve the outcomes that the change was intended to produce. So, my background has been a lot in technology deployments. For those of you who are out there in HR, I've worked a lot in Workday. I actually worked at Workday for a little while. So, if like Workday is your ATS, Workday is your HR solution, I've worked with Workday for quite some time. And so if you think about, what do I do kind of on a day-to-day basis? Well, A, it changes a lot, which is why I love the work. But, any company who has decided that they are going to implement Workday, Workday is a very far-reaching kind of technology. You might have some core HR things like transfers, you might have hiring, you might also have payroll if you're going to do that part of Workday. And so what I would do is kind of come in, partner with the business, partner with HR, figure out who is impacted, how are they going to be impacted, how do they do things today, and how are they going to do things tomorrow, and then figure out what's the difference between those two things. And then the difference between those two things, that becomes my change strategy, my change plan. It becomes a communication plan, a training plan, an engagement plan, a sustainment plan, a readiness plan. I think another misconception sometimes if people have heard the term change management is that it's emails and it's training, but it's actually quite a bit more than that. So I think that's one of the things that, would be good for us to talk about is all of the other things that change management is included. But yeah, I've implemented Workday a number of times, and it's always a challenge because a lot of times everything is changing for folks, and you gotta focus on what managers need to do differently. Managers are a key audience anytime you're deploying Workday. So I know we're going to talk a lot about managers in our conversation, but
Yeah,
hopefully that gives everybody maybe a little bit of a grounding on what we're talking about today.
I think it does, and I think it's important that you made a good distinction there is and if I could say it simply, tell me if I'm wrong, 'cause I try to oversimplify things, is you've got project management, which is the solution, and then you've
Yes.
got change management, which is the adoption of
Yeah, the
said
people. Yep,
solution. Is that
exactly.
kind of
That's
fair? Okay.
that's very, very nicely done.
So when we're talking about what we do, let me put it this way. At Disability Solutions, we helped and do still help big companies around the world build programs that help hire, entertain talent with disabilities at a scale, right? So what's kind of generation 1.0 of disability employment was find a manager who's really passionate and hire disabled people at their facility, at their factory, at their office, which was great. But what we did that really kind of was the next generation was say, how do we live in the technology, the data
Mhm,
management techniques, and the policies so that we ensure that when I walk away, you've got a tool that you can continue to scale with,
mhm,
because we want to live and thrive in the systems that hiring managers, that TA leaders, that recruiters are already using. Um, and when we built those, I could say probably within weeks of starting whether the project would be a long-term success or something we would have to fight to get over the line based on how they approached the implementation and adoption
mhm.
of the project. And too often, what we saw it went to two scales. One is you had a very passionate leader who was passionate about making disability and employment work in their organization, um, or you had someone who is sort of voluntold to get this
Yes.
done.
Yep.
Um, and I've had both. They both have their challenges. And so when we're implementing kind of these kind of projects, what are some of the why do so many well-intentioned workplaces struggle to create these types of initiatives that have lasting results?
Yeah. So I think that's a really good question, and I've seen a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't think that they quite understand that you can't just throw a couple emails at it and expect adoption. Change is hard, change is scary for a lot of people. Any change, I'm, being completely kind of solution agnostic here. Any change is always a concern. And I would say secondarily, I don't think that organizations focus a lot on like mindset and behavior. There's a lot of it's like you said, voluntold. Back in the day, I used to call it comply or die. Um, and it's just they assume that because the solution is out there, it's going to be successful and people are going to use it. Um, and I just don't think right now, or I've seen it work both ways. Some organizations are really good, but in my experience, it's really been that organizations don't want to take the time needed. They're like, let's go, 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 and let's get the solution out. And
Yeah.
hey, my tech team built this solution, or my process teams rebuilt this process. Let's get it out there. That they're not willing to kind of slow down and focus on the people side. So I think it's kind of a time thing, and it's also a people thing. You can't like it's really hard for like one person to lead the charge. It's sometimes it can be doable, but you sometimes need a little bit more people than organizations are really willing to invest in.
Right. Eh, and, what I think is really interesting, having been on the tech side and the implementation side and the DEI, kind of the diversity side, is when I first started this work, I got really frustrated because I didn't feel like they were treating these initiatives as business initiatives, as
Yeah,
business strategies, which
right.
I still think is true. But I also realized, after watching a bazillion kind of, workday implementations,
Sure,
so on
sure.
and so forth, that this is actually a structural barrier within organizations, that they think that adoption is going to happen because they announce it, because they release it, because they spent $1 million on it. Kinda talk to me about, what are some of the warning signs that you see that a project is going is looking okay on the implementation timeline, but in reality is failing?
Yeah, I definitely agree that you can have an extremely successful implementation and your project is not going to achieve the outcomes that you would expect. So some of the warning signs that I have seen are people don't know what you're talking about. For example, a lot of times in my work, we'll send out a survey. We have readiness surveys that we send at specific points in time throughout the implementation. So you might announce the change and announce some key information and then send out a survey and do a test. It's basically a test to check how much are people paying attention. Sending out manager surveys, sending out employee surveys, mid senior level people, how much are they paying attention? And, when you don't get even maybe 3% participation back on that survey, that's a warning sign that it just didn't land. Some of the content, even if you do get good results from that survey, that could be another, and maybe what's in it, people aren't getting it. But a lot of times when we are, as change managers, saying to, even senior leaders, go out and talk about it, they might report back to us that they're getting a lot of questions, managers aren't understanding. I think that a part of change management is really being able to keep your ear to the ground, not just as a change manager. If I assume I'm the change manager on our pretend project that we're talking about here, I might not be able to be out in the organization knowing what's going on, but it's my responsibility to ask questions of the people who are on the project. What are you hearing? What is the feedback? And if you're not hearing that feedback, I think it's important to go out and seek it out. Um, because again, adoption takes time. You're not gonna get something probably within the first 2 months. It's gonna take a little bit of time. You might get somebody to log into a tool, but effective adoption and long-term success, that ramp back up takes a little bit of time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a great point, because again, kind of in initiatives that we've launched, people are very eager to see results.
Yeah,
And I think if you have, let's say, a hire that doesn't work out, that is a real ding on morale. Or you um, have to make some adjustments within a system to make sure that candidates are actually moving through an equitable way. Um, then the hire comes a little bit later. And so really, that um, consistent communication and having a willingness for the people who are participating in initiatives to say, this isn't working,
yeah,
or this is the feedback I've got. I've noticed in our work has been, it's sometimes hard to get a frontline managers to say, or an HR manager or recruiter to say, we're not seeing what we need. The positivity isn't there. They aren't, we aren't ready yet, because they're scared to say something negative on a senior management initiative.
yeah, yeah. 100% agree, 100% agree. And I think that there's times that people kinda have to be bold, but you can give feedback in a safe way, and maybe speak truth to power, by finding the right, channel to
Mhm.
get to. But I wanna make sure that we really because you brought up the idea of the managers there, and I think that that's something that is just super important, especially when we're talking about, diverse hiring, but is the manager the right person always? Because I think maybe sometimes there might be assumptions that, hey, it's HR's job to be doing this. And, that's not really necessarily true. But, I worked on a project a number of years ago at a big financial institution on ensuring that we had diverse interview slates.
Great.
And, that was something that it was treated at the time as this is just policy, back to my comply or die thing. You have to
Mhm.
have you have to have at least one woman on your interview slate, and you have to have at least one diverse candidate on your interview slate. And at the time, I'll look back and take it. I worked on it, but we didn't really nail the message quite well because the feedback that we heard was, this is taking too much time. The one woman on my team is on vacation. The one diverse candidate on my team isn't available. Who am I supposed to get to interview? And rather than seeing that as a symptom of the broader problem, that the company wasn't really diverse enough because you can't even find a diverse interview slate, you know, we really kinda had to take a step back and not and, really get into the hiring managers. We had to pull the CHRO in to be talking about it. We really needed more senior engagement and conversations about why this was important. This isn't really just a governance thing, this is a completely different way of conducting your interviews. So focusing on that mindset shift and figuring out who is the gatekeeper to this decision and who is the gatekeeper to this mindset, I think is really important.
Yeah, and I think it's important, and I've worked on similar projects, kinda on the other side of there has to be a diverse candidate slate versus an interviewer slate, and there was always a lot of pushback, on those types of initiatives, and I cannot I can say fully that I agree with you because the way it was communicated and the way the organizations I worked with is it's because we have to. Right.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not because this is gonna make our business stronger in the long run. It's not because we desperately are in need of Black and brown talent, in these areas of the business, and we aren't getting to them because our current strategy isn't working. It's like, "Look, you just gotta do it. Just do it."
People get tired and they end up with a, "You gotta just do it."
Yeah.
And I think that also kinda goes back to what I was saying at the beginning of our conversation, like, change like this takes time, and you can't just communicate it a couple of times and assume that it's gonna land. It takes work. What's the adage? No, you gotta tell people what you're gonna tell them, then tell them you told them, then remind them that you told them. I think it's like you have to tell people something 7 times before they actually get it. It's really the same kind of thing with change, especially something that requires such an important mindset shift as, diverse hiring. You gotta make sure that you're continuing to focus on the burning platform. Why are we doing this? What does it actually mean to your business outcomes? And, inspire folks to inspiration goes a really long way.
So I think what you're making, though, is a really good point in terms of ongoing adoption too. And
Yeah.
so, especially with yeah, I wanna say human-centric initiatives, um,
Yes.
is you can communicate it for 6 months, and then maybe our transformation leader gets pulled off into some cool new project they're working on, and then senior leadership just expects things to continue to adopt and be successful from there. But talk to me about what a good long-term approach looks like to keep these types of initiatives moving in the right direction and how we truly measure adoption.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I am going to be a little maybe unrealistic here, but I'm going to talk from kind of a perfect world here. So I believe that any change that you introduce into an organization needs to have an owner, a long term owner. And who is the long-term owner in your organization of ensuring that you have diverse candidate slates? Who, I'm just theoretically talking to the audience, who is that person? If you don't know, somebody needs to be responsible for that. And every once in a while, they need to be reminding managers this is important. Doing some top-down cascading from the most senior levels down through the organization to that this is something that is, an organizational prerogative, and this is why we do it. I believe very strongly that you need a long-term owner for
Mhm.
any kind of change that you're going to introduce. Maybe for those of you who, have Workday, you probably have some sort of HR operations team who's responsible for maintaining Workday. It's really the same kind of concept. Who is going to be owning this moving forward? Who's responsible for achieving those outcomes? Um, and then as far as measurement goes, I think that that's really important. Obviously, with a lot of our HR technology these days, there's a lot of reporting capabilities to ensure that you do have diverse slates, either candidate or interview, if you harkening back to the project that I worked on. Um, but I wouldn't underestimate the importance of focus groups and even surveys just to get a pulse check out there. And they don't have to be big, they don't have to be thousands of people, but maybe a small population of hiring managers, a little survey to check in. Because that's more of like a sentiment survey.
Mhm.
That's not the objective data that you're going to get from your like your ATS or something like that. It's more of the interview kind of based
Yeah.
data.
Well, and sentiment changes over time.
That's
And today I can be really excited about it, and tomorrow I can be really unhappy with
frustrating.
it, and it ebbs and flows because, something you and I were talking about before we hopped on is how critical managers are
Mhm.
to change. I mean, in essence, every team that I've ever managed or every project we've ever worked on, managers are essentially the gatekeepers
They are.
of
They are.
change.
They are.
And so some of them are great champions of progress, and some of them are intentional barriers to progress, and
True.
some of them are very much unintentional
Yep.
barriers to progress. So, you know, talk about why is it so important to understand a the headspace that a middle manager lives in these days,
Mhm.
and how their headspace and what information they're provided and incentive they're provided um, fosters success.
Yeah, so to be maybe a little provocative here, I don't know that they're provided with a lot to foster success, and I think that that's one of the challenges that I really see. A lot of times people are promoted to managers because they were good at being individual contributors.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the skill to be a manager and even have the, right EQ to be a manager is very different. And in my experience, you know, especially the bigger companies that I've supported throughout my career, they just assume that because you were good at being an individual contributor, you're going to be good enough being a manager. And there are study after study. ProSci, which is kind of the change management golden standard. So if anybody doesn't know ProSci, you can go out to prosci.com, PROSCI. You don't know anything about change management, they'll help you. But they've done research showing that people want to hear from the CEO and their manager. Um, Willis Towers Watson have done research about the role of the manager in transformation. And when you focus on the manager, you are 2.5 times more likely to achieve your business outcomes if you focus on the manager. I mean, it's just kind of study after study after study,
Wow.
the importance of the manager. But too often in a change plan, I've seen that, managers are going to get a communication and some talking points and consider it that's good enough. We gave them what they needed and that's good enough. But I would challenge organizations to say, you know, are your managers skilled in being able to navigate the emotional complexity that comes with talking to an individual employee about how their job is going to change? And if not, then you, kind of have a you really need to kind of help your managers out and give them some tools in order to help them communicate that change a little bit more. I have a little acronym that I use, which is CORES, CORES. C stands for context. So making sure that the manager has the context and the manager is able to communicate the context of the change. Why is the new way going to be better than the old way? And sometimes that can be really hard. And so, especially in situations where it's maybe an unpopular change, being able to equip managers with the ability to say, we might not like this, but that's okay, this is why we're doing it, and this is why it's important. So the O stands for outcomes or objectives. Why are we doing this? Why is it critical? And then the R stands for rally, which is really, helping people become inspired. Um, when managers can inspire and motivate employees, there was another study done that showed that employees would be 67% more engaged and they would see significantly faster adoption and change when managers were able to have the tools to inspire, tell stories, things like that, really rally their team. The E in core stands for enable, making sure that they have the resources in place in order to be successful in the future. And then, of course, S stands for sustain. So CORES. It's just kind of a little easy acronym to remember when managers need to communicate change. And also, organizations can use that little acronym to say, are we giving managers all of these elements?
Yes, and what does success within each one of those elements look
Correct.
like? I think that's the
Yeah.
really other important piece of what you're talking about is that um, because managers are so overloaded and they are frequently just told to communicate X, say this, run with the party line, you're fine.
Do it. Just do
Um,
it. Do it. Just
it
do it.
really, yeah. I mean, it's demoralizing to them
It is.
because they feel like they're sent a communication and they can't realistically explain why it's important.
That's
And
right.
they probably don't have the buy-in to it yet either because they've
That's right.
also just been told, "Hey, here's
That's
an
right.
email, make this happen." And when you're talking again about people-led or people-centric initiatives, um, the emotional intelligence of your managers becomes critically more important, and we don't provide them with that guidance. So on a project by project basis, you have to start trying to equip them with some emotional intelligence by
That's
being
right.
emotionally intelligent yourself as a leader.
That's right.
I think this, you're just seeing the
100%.
downward
Yeah, I would
trickle.
also say, like, underscoring this entire course, things has to be empathy. Empathy is the foundation of everything, understanding, being empathetic to what's coming down from you. It's almost like that idea of, assume good intent. Nobody is introducing a change just to make your life difficult. There is some purpose to it. And then empathy down, meaning how are you gonna talk to your direct reports with a sense of empathy so that they understand that it's that emotional, that EQ that you were talking about, and not all managers have it.
No, I'll say this and then I'll have a closing thought. But leading people is like raising children. No one tells you how to do it. You've just got to figure it out. And you spend a lot of time crying,
Yeah,
messing up, and then
yep,
trying to fix it.
right, it.
Um, so the fact that we don't engage as I mean, the fact that corporate America has not figured out the value in creating emotionally intelligent, well trained leadership still blows my mind. That could be an entire different podcast.
That could
Um,
be.
but as we wrap up, I think
Yeah,
this has been an insightful conversation. I think it's such an important conversation. And so just sorry, you're hearing my dog in the background drinking a
yes,
lot of water, I would guess right now. Um, so last question. When organizations are feeling overwhelmed by change, whether it's like a transformative initiative, an accessibility effort, a new solution, like implementing a new ATS or CRM. What's the one thing that you wish leaders would stop doing, and the one thing that they should start doing instead?
So, the one thing that I wish that they would start doing is making sure that leaders are aligned. And when I say aligned, I mean that they are talking the talk and that's followed up by action outside of, I'll just say the boardroom, the senior leadership room. Looking at a portfolio of change, making sure that everybody knows what that portfolio is and that they are all aligned, that it is equally important. I am consistently amazed at the volume of change that we are faced with just as human beings right now. It is possible to continue, building the airplane and flying it. And I know sometimes that is what an organization has to do. But I think that the thing that I wish would stop happening the most is that everybody says this is the most important. And so you have this popcorn of no, I'm more important, I'm more important, I'm more important. So employees don't really know where to look.
Right.
So if an organization can align at the most senior level as to what truly are the most critical initiatives so that employees know where to focus
Mhm.
and then appropriately sequence all the other ones so that employees can focus. I don't know but another better word for it, so that employees can focus as these different initiatives kind of come at them, and the last thing I would say is just please prepare your managers. They're
Yeah.
very overloaded, they're very tired, they don't always know what they're doing. Prepare your managers.
Yeah.
That's
That's
another thing.
a perfect end note. If our guests would like to find you or our listeners, tell them where to get a hold of you.
Yeah, so you can find our website at meaningfulchangeconsulting.com. I am at Julie at meaningfulchangeconsulting.com, and you can find me on LinkedIn by searching my last name, Julie Gawle, Gawle. And I think
Great.
my phone number might end up being in the show notes, so
Oh
you
my
can
goodness.
contact me as well.
You're very brave. Julie, thank you so much. Today was such a great conversation, a truly needed conversation. And I think it helps both our TA leader listeners and our HR listeners understand more about how to approach an initiative, but it also helps our community understand a little bit behind the curtain about how initiatives get built, how they fail, and how much pressure managers are under to make, to your last point, which I think was so beautiful, multiple initiatives successful at the same time.
Yes.
Um, so thank you for joining us, guys. Go check out our back catalog, follow us on YouTube. Lot more to come this year. And we'll be putting out our disability at work survey. Go take it if you haven't, and we'll be kicking off our fall webinar series here pretty soon. So talk to you soon. Bye.
Thanks. Bye, Julie.